Okay, today's project is this old Kriesler, kind of a portable radiogram type thing. The model is 11-79. Looks like it's from the 50s or 60s. Not sure, can't see anything about when it was made. But it was made by Kriesler Australasia Proprietary Limited, 43 Alice Street, Newtown, New South Wales. Made in Australia. So it's certainly old. Basically the turntable isn't working. This has been sitting in a little old lady's house who's now died, unfortunately, and her relatives want to see if we can get this going. It all seems to power up alright. The radio, the dial, looks like it's making a bit of sound. Picking up some rubbish there. Probably not much AM reception in my garage. Well, it does sound like when I'm hitting the local AM radio stations it's making a horrible buzzing noise. If I turn it over to gram, I'm not sure if this should start up from the arm or what the story is. I can't seem to turn this speed selection. It's got 16, 33, 45 and 78. And it's got the old style of turntable. You can switch between 78 on the needle and LP. Not sure if the needle's even any good on this one. Looks like it's still there, which is a good sign. And there's a couple of spare wires hanging off here, so it looks like it's just got probably a mono ceramic cartridge in there. Doesn't look the best, that needle, but a bit hard to see without really looking up close. I just undid the transit screws so it moves in case that had anything to do with it. I seem to remember some of these old players had funny ways of starting them up, but I can't see anything obvious here, so I think I'll just take the screws out around the record player base here and we'll have a look and see what's going on. I can feel a bit of heat coming out. I think this thing would have valves in the radio. Definitely something warm down in there, so I probably should turn the power off until I know what's going on. But yeah, I don't know if it is. It didn't seem to take long to get going the radio, but maybe they're already, maybe the valves probably in the amplifier section, that maybe they're all running already. Because normally a valve unit would take quite a while to warm up, but it'd be interesting to have a look inside this thing anyway. Looks like we can also take the panel off behind the radio. It might be worth a quick look in there just to see what's in there and whether anything looks good or bad. Any old capacitors or anything, but I'll get these screws out and we'll have a look what the turntable's set up like. Okay, so we've got, there is a switch here. Oops, what was that? Just the so we've got a switch. Not really very long wires on here either, annoyingly. That's the motor. But down here there's a switch. Looks like it actually got two coils in the motor, and the switch possibly shorts the two separate coils together. When I'm moving this arm, even when I move it enough to move this lever, this other plate isn't moving at all. It's got a spring on it, so I assume that's meant to push that way, so it's just most likely just seized up from age. Not sure what this other bit does. And of course we've got our speed selection switch, which also is jammed, so I think we're going to have to replace some grease. Looks like, being a portable especially, the Platter doesn't just pull off this one. That was another thing I wanted to check, but there is a brass nut here which I reckon will allow the whole Platter to come off and we can check the idler and stuff. And yeah, it's only a mono connection here anyway. It's actually got wiring back down to the terminal block for stereo, so maybe it came out of whatever factory, the Monarch or whatever made this turntable. But Kriesler has only got an earth, which is bridged to one of the wires to the cartridge, as well as attached to the turntable earth, the chassis. And yeah, that's actually old rubber coated wire. Well, look at that, that's how old this thing is. Wow, so that's old shielded, rubber coated shielded cable. The mains cable's a bit newer, so, but yeah, whether this is 50s or 60s, I'm not sure. I forgot to take those bits off. So let's see if we can get this platter loose. I'll just use a big pair of pliers and see if it'll undo. Yeah, not a problem. Careful this thing doesn't fall out on its own. I'm not sure if this comes right out or what I'm supposed to do here, but I'll take it right out. I bet this is probably seized on any... Oh, here it comes, I think. I'll try and... Got more play than I had before, I think, or have I? And this is going to be the problem with this whole thing, is working out how to get it all apart, especially when all the grease is dried up. Oh yeah, I can see it moving in there. So why won't it come right out? Is there some trick to this? It's always the problem with working on stuff you're not familiar with. And you know, certainly I have seen these units I think before, way back years and years ago. They were around occasionally, but I don't think I've ever worked on one. Just old stuff that you'd see around the place. I'm not sure if that shaft's meant to do anything, but it slides up a bit and then doesn't go any further, so I really would like to get that apart because I'm going to have to lubricate everything on this thing, but... Oh, it's coming now. Ah, there you go. It was just a matter of... That must be where the bolt's at, and yeah, the grease. Yeah, it's actually not completely sticky. Now we can see the inner workings of this thing. Pretty standard, little idler tyre, multiple pulleys on the motor to set the speeds, and the idler just goes up and down with the speed. You can see where it's meant to slide up and down there, but I bet that's as, I think that's as stuck as. So as we turn this knob, it's meant to slide this bit along, whereas yeah, the bit that pushes on this anyway. Yeah, and then that goes up a little ramp on the side here, which is meant to lift this bit up and down, but I'm betting that shaft there is seized up. Yeah, there's a pin in a little ramp, pin in an upper ramp, and then there's a lower ramp connected to our knob. And the reason our knob can't go back and forwards, I'd say, is because this part isn't doing what it should, which must be to rise and fall. It's probably just because this pin here, I think this thing seems to be completely seized. Of course it's made out of fragile zinc. So how I'm going to budge that, I think we're going to have to put some CRC or something on that, keeping the... I can possibly remove this rubber bit, so I don't want to risk getting any petroleum based products or anything on that, because you won't buy one of these in a hurry. In the old days you used to be able to get universal idler wheels and stuff. I'll have to pull this apart anyway, I think, because everything needs a lubrication in this thing, because who knows how many years or decades it's been since it was last used. Carefully get that clip out. And of course my bloody side cutters are magnetised for some reason. I think I can just drop that off as the easiest way. I'll probably have to take this off the little pin it's on as well. That's actually spinning pretty freely. I'll just take that circlip off there and lift that off. Could probably just leave that there for now. But that is, I'm pretty sure this bit should move freely, and it doesn't, so yeah, this other grease is quite sticky, which is, you know, it's a miracle it's still going at all really after how long it probably hasn't been used for. And yeah, the grease around there's, yeah, it's still got a little bit of life around the spindle there, but what have we got here? That must be, oh, maybe that's the end of record sensor or something. I don't think this has an automatic, it doesn't have an automatic arm, I don't think, but that may well turn the switch off or something when it gets to the middle. See, it's a Monarch brand turntable, which I haven't really heard of before, or forgotten if I have. So I'm not sure where that came from. It's not usually a BSR or something on these things. And Looks like my RP7's on walkabout again. So I'll just apply a little bit of RP7. All this old grease is going to have to be stripped off anyway. See if we can get that penetrating fluid in there. I don't know if it's going to do any good, but that's going to have to come free eventually. Not sure that pin should be bent like that either. It's possible that's bent. Or is it just this plate is stuck? I don't know. The plate's, I think, reasonably loose. I don't think that shaft will come off either, which is annoying. Oh, actually it does. Oh, here we go. Maybe I can take that bit right off. It's amazing, these old days they used to actually hold things together with nuts and threads and stuff. Of course, all the more modern stuff, everything's press fitted and punched into place and stuff, and you can't dismantle anything off one of these turntable chassis, but this one looks like you can pretty much take everything off the original press plate that is the base. There's a washer there going to come loose. Now the question is, can I get this out? Because that damn pin, it's a little on the long side. So I'll get this washer off the other side, at least that's the other way then. Probably, I don't know, does this plug in somewhere? It might well do. Oh, there's something there. Is it a plug though? It's a lot easier to work on if I can take the thing out of this unit. Looks like a plug. We've got an RCA on the other one. Like an old TV one, but even that doesn't want to come off. This should come out. Looks like an old Bakelite 2-pin plug, but it does not want to. I can unscrew the top of it, I think, but I don't think I should need to. Surely that's just a 2-pin plug or a 4-pin plug or something. It does not want to come out. No, I don't want to force it. Oh, here we go, the pin's out. Can I now get it to lift? And there we have it. I see, or is that meant to be... No, that's fixed to the base, so that must rotate on there, surely. And it must slide up and down as well, so at least I can get to the other side of it. Yeah, that washer's disgusting. See, it'll stick to my hand, basically. That's how bad the grease is. So at least I can get underneath and give it another squirt of the penetrating fluid. So it's just going to be a matter of, yes, I'll put some underneath as well as on top. The real hassle is there's not much room here to actually grab onto this thing while holding the other bit. I don't want to put pliers on the surface or anything. Where's the paper towel? Just try and wipe all this old grease off the bottom of it at least. That is very badly seized in there. Yeah, a lot of mucky old grease on the bottom as well. Try and get some of the grease around. At least that RP7 removes the grease. It seems to be dissolving it, but whether it can get down inside this thing and dissolve it in there, I may well have to soak this in something. I think might be the only hope. Some horrible dried up grease on the bottom of it. Possibly if I even put the nut back on there and just tighten it, I've got something then to... Ah, no, except I dropped it. I have something to that I can put the pliers on if I'm careful not to. I mean, this is solid steel, but I think the nuts, yeah, it might be a steel nut. Still, it's a pretty fine thread. I don't want to risk damaging it, but that's at least something I can grip in some pliers, and once I tighten it right up, I've got something to apply a little bit of force, gentle force to this thing. Try and get it to rotate in there, but this really is amazingly tight. I think I'm going to have to soak that in some petroleum or something and hope that actually comes free eventually. Well, that doesn't move that much. Let me think. The idler though sits on that, so it's got to go up and down on these pulleys. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it needs quite a range of movement. I guess this, how does this work? It must pivot or something. It does slide, or meant to slide. Or is it this? Oh, that's what slides. Can I? Yeah, I should be able to now turn the. Oh yeah, there's the. I don't know if that can be seen. But yeah, that upper slot. You can see the white thread there. Then there's a lower slot, and that upper slot's what the pin on this shaft goes in. So that comes up quite high, down quite low, so it's definitely seized because everything's working now that I've removed that part, even though all that grease is going to have to be changed. But I couldn't even turn this knob before. Oh, don't forget I've got that washer in there. So there is quite a bit of range there. And that was just what this little thing to lock it in each position. So that explains why it's got such a high turntable, I guess. Or high platter, because it's got to have this thing lift up and down. Or up is the only thing that really matters. But that goes up quite high. And yeah, that should, via this little pin sticking out on the side here, that should slide. As that metal piece goes up and down and that slot in it, this should go up and down this steel shaft, this cast bit. But it's probably been 20 years or more, probably a lot more than 20 years even since it's been used, and that is just seized on there. So I'm going to soak that in something probably overnight and hope it releases it, and whatever it is, penetrating fluid or petrol or something, can get in and eat all that old grease out, or at least enough of it that I can start moving it. But it just, the old grease just ends up going like glue basically, and just bonds things together quite well. You wouldn't think grease would make such a good glue, but it works pretty well. And what do I do with that washer? I'll better give that a clean off too. Absolutely covered in disgusting grease. And then the fun bit's going to be trying to remember how to put it all back together again. I might even put that on that shaft as well, so I know where it belongs, and that'll help. A bit of petrol or something will help eat all that grease off this as well, because it's still quite sticky and doesn't want to come off. At least all those bits are together then. Which is often the best way to do it, because then you know where they went. Because it's not a familiar model to me, and I'll probably never see one again. Probably never pull one apart in my life. And if I did, it'd be a long, long time ago. Yeah, they're all together, and I could put the circlet back on there, but I think I can remember that easy enough. The idler's in amazingly good condition. I'll give that a clean, because would have had my hands touching it and grease and God knows what. Even the rubber mounts for that motor. This has been stored in a house in good conditions in a cupboard, so it's actually the rubber mounts for the motor there, which come up where these circlips are. Amazingly good condition. Probably close to what they were when they're new. Same with this idler. But yeah, I'll take that off and give that a lube. It's actually spinning really well, but I'll just go over everything. All the grease on these will have to come off. because once this grease starts going like that, it's just going to get worse. Even if we start using it again, it might free up a bit, but it's better just to recoat it with all new stuff. I don't think that pivot point's actually got, I think it should loosen up a bit as well. That doesn't seem to have any grease on it, so that's, you know, that doesn't need any grease on there. It's got some sort of, not a plastic washer, but some sort of, it's not a felt washer either, I don't know what that stuff is. That red sort of material, which is almost like a plastic, but I think those bits are all pretty good, but there's a lot of grease on this. And yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing if I can work it out and unplug this whole unit, but yeah, how's the motor itself probably wants. I did spin it, I think. Yeah, that spins very nicely. A lot of these old motors just have, looks like it's got the, I'm not sure if it's brass, bronze type bearings that I think are self-lubricating, so normally they don't need playing with. And but you definitely, I think it's better not to put any oil or anything on these things. They probably could spin a little bit freer, but that's pretty good. And yeah, there is some grease underneath here as well. What do we got here? Oh, that's the knob itself. Ideally you'd lubricate this knob, but I must admit that's some sort of bakelite, unless it's got a grub screw on it, which I don't think it did. No, I don't think I'd be going to actually remove this speed selector knob. Chances are it's going to be seized on, and you've either got to try and grip it up above or pry something under it. If you prise under it, it's going to break the skirt off the bottom of it. So the fact that moves really well, I'm not going to touch that because it's just not worth the risk. But ideally you would actually do something with that. Now the other interesting thing is I still haven't seen this switch operate. So I wish I could have to work out how to get that wire out. So this lever here is, oh yeah, it is moving now. Oh, that's what that one above does, something locks it in place. So now the arm should push, oh yeah. And now we've got, I guess the power stays on until it reaches the end of the record or something, and then it must push that, release that thing to let this click back like so. But yeah, I think I'll pull this bit off here. These are like probably not going to come off. No, they've actually got rivets through them. A couple of things to hold those levers on. The other one has a bolt on it. There'll be a good chance to check this upper part anyway, but it doesn't look like it needs any lubrication there. This does feel a little tight. I might even get away with just a bit of grease there, but it might be worth checking this. See what they've done in there. There might be some dried up grease under that bolt. These other bits don't look like they've ever been lubricated and shouldn't really need it. They're just bits of metal that move around. Now the tone arm itself, that's another thing that may need lubing. Actually moves very freely. I think it's a light aluminium by the look of it. You can see it's silver underneath. So again, if that seems really free, I think I'll leave that alone. I don't think it had any lubricant in there anyway, but there must be some sort of pivot up the middle, but the fact that feels good, I think I'll just leave it alone rather than risk breaking any parts. A little bit of play in it, but I think that's alright. So I'll get this thing in something and try and eat the old grease out of it and see if we can move it. Because otherwise we're in big trouble. I definitely wouldn't try forcing that up or down, except as an absolute last resort. It isn't thick enough around the middle. You probably could sit this flat bit like in a vise or something, and just with the other edge and gently tap that down or something. If you put another nut right up the end so you can't damage the thread, but even then it's Not something I want to do, but if I can get at least feeling like it's slightly loose, might be able to tap that down. Once you break the bond, it should come out after that. Yeah, that pin is, I think that pin's meant to be on an angle like it is. It looks like it's moulded. Oh yeah, you can see it's actually been moulded in like that into either into the molten metal, or it's been driven into a hole after they drilled into it. I reckon that's been cast around that, some sort of little thing there, so it's probably, that pin had the zinc or aluminium cast around it. Anyway, we'll get all these other parts in a bag and get this soaking. Okay, back on this turntable. I've managed to get it out of the unit now. I ended up pulling the radio out of the box, and it turns out it is just a 4-pin plug. It was actually had come out about halfway, but it didn't feel like it wanted to come out, so I didn't want to force it. But just a 4-pin plug for the power. There's only 2 wires on it, and an RCA soldered, pretty crude sort of one, just with a bit of shielded cable going into it. No plastic covers or anything fancy. Not that they probably had a lot of plastic in those days, but it's got plastic tube on it. I did find out the unit's made in 1960 on the radio. One of the transformers has some date in 1960 on it, so I assume it was made around that time anyway. The good news is this little part, I left it actually, and I just sprayed some like aerosol degreaser, sort of stuff you use on car engines and stuff like that. Just squirted some of that into a little plastic tub and left it overnight, and then I just tightened the nut right up, and I actually thought it was feeling like there was something going wrong with the nut tightening up, but then I realised it was actually just turning this. It was still really tight. You couldn't push it back and forwards, up and down, but once I turned it, I'd just start to move, so I sort of basically just kept turning it and pushing up and down a bit till I got it out, and then just cleaned all the grease off. So this definitely slides up and down as it should now. So that's to do with our speed selection, to get the idle on the right size, right diameter pulley. But at least that was the main problem with this thing. And like I say, I also got it unplugged out of the unit, which makes it a bit easier to work on. I might actually take this wooden panel off. Most turntables I'll have to undo these, or screw in these transit screws to let it lift up a bit. But on the end of the transit screws, or the fixing screws, I might have to go even further by look at it, probably right the way down. They have these black metal things that I figured, oh yeah, it's that way you push it, so the part with the slot in it goes along the shaft. And that's all that's basically holding these in. Most of these earlier turntables are held on by a couple of these clips. So I think at the factory they pushed them in, and I forget if you can get them to flip. You need to sit them like that, and you can sit the turntable down through the holes. And to get them back out, you normally have to flip them with a screwdriver or something, but I'm not sure if these will actually flip over. I don't think they do, just from screwing them. But sometimes you just got to get a bit of access from below. You know, that actually stops there. So yeah, it's been a while since I've seen one. I forget exactly how it's supposed to work. Yeah, no, that holds it in place better. But if you can get these down through the holes and then push them with something to flip them back sideways again, that's usually all that holds these turntables on. Just a couple of screws and these things. If you try and lift it up, obviously they catch on the hole, but if you can flip them the other way again, the whole turntable will lift out, making it a bit easier. But anyway, now we've got the wood off because I don't want to damage any of that. It's some sort of, I'm not sure what this stuff is, very old though. I think it's just like some sort of stuck on, probably almost like a cloth, or like, it's a very thin sheet. I'm not sure what that is. It might be some cloth with something else on it, or like a fancy, might just be like a wallpaper or something. Certainly looks quite a bit like a bit of wallpaper. Very hard to tell, but anyway, we don't want to mark that or damage that. So now this piece goes back in, well, I can still remember where everything was. Although I need to clean all the grease off this part. And I think, yeah, down where the shaft, the platter goes, and possibly even on this bit. I think the bit on the switch was a little tight. Let's actually have a look at how that mechanism works. So I assume when we... What's the bit that stops it? It's that bit, isn't it? Yeah, that thing. So what actually lifts it? Nothing seems to really lift it. If we go back, put that there, the switch is pressed in, which I think is off. Maybe you need it to... Oh no, it can't spin up. So there's this piece here. What? I can't see anything that lifts that, that causes that to lift. If I just done it, you would think... Ah, that's what it is. I knew there was a trick to these. You got to swing the arm outwards to start it. Ah, that's the trick. Ha! I knew there was something with these old record players. Yes, the arm out, engages the switch, starts the motor up. So we come in, this comes right across. Doesn't seem to lift it though. Is there some... Oh, is there something on the platter itself? Is the next question. Oh yes. We have this little kind of cam type arrangement, bit of plastic or Bakelite. Yes, and it ramps up. I don't know if I can get that on the camera, but it starts off as a pointy edge and it actually ramps up as it goes around, so I'm guessing that gets under this thing. Yeah, so obviously outside of where that is, this lever's outside of where that little inner gear is, but as we come in, that eventually will come in a range and then that gear will get underneath it, lift it up, and it will just stop where it is. But at least the motor turns off and the record's not making that scratching sound as it goes around the inner groove. So it looks like it's got at least an auto stop. But to start it, yeah, we've got to go outwards. I knew there was a trick to these. It's so long since I've touched one of these old turntables. But I guess the next step is going to be to use a bit of terps or something and try and maybe some cotton buds or paper towel and try and remove as much of this grease. Got a bit of something floating around in there. Yeah, it's actually got an end that where the spindle sits for the platter has got an end on it. There was just a screw in the side I had to undo on that side to release it, so that's going to have to be cotton buds or something down in there. Might use a roll of solder to keep that level. So I'm going to have to clean right down in there, let it dry out, whatever I clean it with, and re-grease that. And these levers here, I mean, they're still running pretty free, but that grease is getting sticky. I don't know that that part comes off. No, that's riveted on this piece on the spring here. That it's a sort of rivet type thing. So I'll just have to clean it as best I can, clean out underneath it. Yeah, there's no way I can really lift and, but with a bit of terps or something, that should dissolve that grease. I could even use that degreaser stuff. I might even use, since I've got it in a container, might dip some cotton buds in that. Okay, so I've got a cotton bud, and just off to the side here I've got me, that's a little container with some degreaser in it that I used to eat the grease out on that other one. Oh, it's like cleaning out your ears. Pretty horrible stuff. That degreaser should eat into this rather well. I'll just have to make sure I remove all the degreaser before I put new grease in there. Yeah, some pretty horrible muck in there. Oops, I just put it all over the side. Use a bit of paper towel just to clean all this up. Might even see if I can Get that right down inside. Lovely. I have to be careful of this since it's got an end on it. I don't want to get anything left down in there because I won't be able to get it out. That's how black it was at the bottom. Yuck. Could almost squirt a bit of... Yeah, I might even squirt a little bit of degreaser down there. So I'll just use some of this Motor Tech or whatever, a couple of dollars a can stuff. Just try and get that to clean anything out that's dissolve anything that's down there. Yeah, it's getting a lot cleaner now. So I think we've got the worst of it. Yeah, it's pretty good. I don't think there's any real grease down there. I can see the bottom's pretty clean, sides are clean. So next problem is going to be, I can dip this in a bit of degreaser, trying to get all the grease off here, and that eats it up pretty well. You want to remove every last bit of this and just make sure it's not going to affect the paint, which it doesn't seem to be doing. Whole inside of this thing could do with a good clean, but it's in pretty good condition for its age. Like I say, been kept in a cupboard in a house and in amazing condition. But the problem with leaving these things lying around is that the grease will go. I mean, it may have gone at this many years in anyway, but it seems that if grease is used on a regular basis and smeared around, it seems to keep its consistency. And it often seems to be the same with rubber parts, rubber belts and stuff. If they're used, they seem to keep their consistency and keep going, but as soon as you just leave them sitting there, they deteriorate for some reason. Yeah, lovely grease on there. Yes, plenty of it. I want to get it out of all these slots and stuff, just clean every surface, including the slots where the pins slide along and stuff, and every little corner. There's quite a bit of stuff stuck in there, and it really doesn't want to come off either. Where else does this... Oh yeah, that's just the pin that slides up and down, so it's probably going to be coated. But every face, every surface, inside of every slot, anything that's got grease on it. Now that should move back and forwards. Oh yeah, that gets it out of the way a bit. Quite a bit of goop there. Even some down below. May even have to use a screwdriver blade or something just to try and remove some of these last bits where they're down holes and stuff. That's gone really hard, whatever's down in there. Some of it will go really solid. And yeah, unfortunately this plate's covered with it, but I think that's also... Oh no, I can take that off. Oh, is that going to... Oh, but it's riveted onto there. I can get some of this grease from below. Oh, look at yuck. Yeah, it's right down this plate underneath as well. So I'm just going to have to move these parts to all the different positions. I can actually remove this rivet type thing there, but I'm not sure that actually gets me anywhere. It might allow me to lift this other lever out. Oh yeah, it does. That end's just hooked in under, that end just lifts. Not sure I really need to take that off. If I can get this clean anyway. And considering I can access some from below, I might need to put a little bit of spray degreaser on there, try and keep this stuff away from rubber parts and stuff just in case it affects them. Because we can't really get any parts of this thing anymore, so we don't want to damage anything or cause anything to deteriorate. Yeah, I think I can get under enough of this even without removing it, but I might remove it anyway just to be sure, because the bottom of this plate's going to be covered in it. And I need to get under this one as well. Maybe if I remove that, this should swing across more. So let's see, I need to remove this little spring. Often the tips of side cutters are actually quite good for removing these. You just don't want to cut into the metal at all, but at least you can grip the little things. That's just a solder. So that was, yeah, this bit here. Just the underside of that lever. One bit just hooks in there, the other bit should just lift out. There's, yeah, some definite grease here. And we've got a couple of circlips across here. See if I can get them out with a screwdriver. Yeah, a bit of odd ones, these ones. Bit different to the modern circlip, but same principle. I think they've just cut more metal out on the new ones. Just sit that on the platter so I can find it. There's a little spring washer under there, which also wants just wipe that to remove anything. Even that circlip probably wants to clean, just to make sure any grease is gone. And if we lift, now is this pin going to lift off? There we go. So the underside of this bit, which I can actually swing right out, yeah, covered in grease. Put a little bit more degreaser on there. And the whole underside here wants cleaning. It's covered in grease. Yeah, the plate's already starting to fall through. I just have to be careful I don't put that on anything. That's already dropped off. Not surprisingly. So this is the part that does the, well, it was sitting down, what was it, sitting like that. And that's the bit pushed by that other lever I took off here. This just goes to our speed knob. Still a little bit of grease on there. I think some of this has gone quite hard. Any of this yellow muck, oh god, it's coated in. Yeah, I'd recommend getting rid of all of this, just because it's become a horrible hard sticky substance. Won't matter up that part of the shaft anyway, just the bit where it pivots really is what matters, but I'd prefer to just, if I see it I try and clean it off. It's created a kind of solid coating. Yeah, get at least away from the pivot points where the pin goes through. And now my spring's getting caught in the carpet on the bench. So yeah, that's quite filthy underneath with grease, just absolutely coated. So that's why I pulled it out, and plenty of grease still. I thought I was getting rid of it, but it's still very greasy under there. Now that's much better. You can just wipe it right off back to bare metal. Yeah, this bit I can't, this is actually riveted on, so I can't remove it, but I can move it further to one side. No, it's got a pin pin in the slot. I probably shouldn't bend that up, I don't think I'll take the risk. Might be able to bend it up slightly and slide it further, but whether it'll go back into its original shape, and the pin on that actually going down through that slot, that's got more grease on it. So I have to try and get that from below. Oops, should have probably taken that idle right off. So yeah, we've got and these slots still full of grease. So you want to get the sides of the slots. If the cotton bud doesn't fit in, you can just use your paper towel or something. So I've got a pin under there, that's going to be a cotton bud job. I want to get every surface of that free of grease. Get it back to plain metal. Yeah, that's pretty good. And just being careful with this tone arm not to let it fall around. It kind of clips on here and holds in place a bit, but probably better not to trust that to hold it. Yeah, still, if I keep moving that side to side, we're getting more degreaser and grease out from under it. Just keep wiping it until it's dry, basically. There probably is a little bit of shitty grease under this that I won't be able to get. If I keep wiping it, I should get the worst of it. It's very free anyway. I'm not sure if that pin was covered in grease. It probably was, so everything just wants a clean. And onto this bit, there's grease up and down this slot where the riveted pin is. And again, I want to get right in that slot. Get the paper towel right through it and get all the grease out of it. And since I can't actually undo that rivet, or certainly don't want to undo it and try and fix it, you just got to move it back and forwards a heap of times until it leaves no grease behind. And the other side here is absolutely filthy, so you just keep moving everything until it's all gone. Even if you can't get it directly, just have to smear it around until it's all over some other surface and take it off there. Yes, I'm right down in some difficult spots here, but I want to get this as close to clean metal as possible. You probably could put a part like this in the actual container of degreaser and again leave it a few hours or overnight or whatever, just to be sure you got rid of everything. And then you have to dry it again to make sure you get rid of all the degreaser. That seems to be pretty close. There's a little bit deciding in there. For some reason there's one little bit in one of the edges in the little corner of this thing that doesn't want to come off because it's gone hard. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, just that bit. There's one tiny little bit there that's loose. On this back of this rivet, there's, it looks like the degreaser is slowly getting into it now. It wouldn't come off before, but it's softening up. Yuck. Don't think that's really even in the path of anything important, but still, just to get rid of it. Just a little bit on that. Yeah, I'm not leaving any behind. I might just clean that again anyway. I'll give it maybe one more bit of clean paper towel and double check I've got everything off it. And there is still a little bit of, it's probably some of the wet stuff I'm putting on myself. It's probably more degreaser than grease, but I can keep sliding that back and forth and wiping. Just a little bit of something there. I think there's actually a bit of dried up grease on this. Is that grease or something else? It doesn't seem to be coming off, but it might be. Might just be the surface. I think it's just the metals, slightly different colours. I don't know, surely that's grease. Don't want to scratch this too much, but just grease on it anyway, but it's just, yeah, the colours on the surface are different. I don't know if that's just from rubbing or what, and there's just a little bit of grease, which really doesn't matter in this rivet, but I might just get rid of it for the hell of it. Just to be a perfectionist. I don't think that's got any ability, since it's hard as hell anyway. It's not going to move around or anything and get onto other parts. But still, might as well be fairly thorough with this. That's pretty good. Now let's get rid of that paper towel and get some fresh stuff. Might just put a bit of metho or something on it and give it a final wipe down. Yeah, that's better. Is it leaving anything light? I don't think it is. Just keep pivoting that round just to make sure I scrape out any grease that's under there. It's really not going to matter at this point, there's so little of it. And now I guess the thing is going to be to get the grease back on there. Let's see, that went in that way. That went in there. Well, it's not attached, so... yeah, and that lifts up and down. That's a lot freer than it was anyway. Even not putting grease on there, it would probably... you probably almost could get away with it, given it's not going to get much use anyway, I don't think. Almost be safer not to grease the thing. Just so it doesn't do this again in the future. But ideally it wants a little bit on there just so the metal doesn't wear away the other metal. Eventually get some scratches or whatever and a lot of friction on the surface, which could happen. It's probably not going to, but we'll put it back to how the manufacturer had it anyway. And that spindle's going to need a bit of a clean. Now that I've had my greasy hands all over everything and cleaning off grease and stuff, and it wouldn't have hurt to do it anyway. But there's no black idler tire on there, so it probably hasn't had much use. I think they're the only... oh, actually that bottom surface is used, so I'll try and not put my fingers on any of it, since I've probably got a bit of grease on my hands now, and fingerprints sometimes affect these things. So I'll clean that without touching it at all. So I need grease down there. That's polyglide. Have I got any of the other stuff? Oh, there it is. Might use the black grease. I think it's more for metal. The old Langsiet Fett or whatever it is, which I think means brown grease or something. Black grease, I guess. So probably need a little bit. I'll have to clean the actual shaft itself. And I guess a bit more down. Down on the inside there. Now, need to get this out again. Put a bit under this other one where there was some grease. Probably not the best applicator, might be better off with a cotton bud or something, I think. Get off there. That should smear it on a bit better. On both sides of that, there's plenty, I think. I'll just put a little bit around there so if I can get it to go under these other parts as well, where I couldn't clean. And we had it on this plate. up and down this, where this bit slides, on the faces and on the inside a bit. Don't think it needs a real lot, so I prefer to keep the grease fairly light. And a bit on that slot as well where the other pin goes. Yeah, that's all looking good. Yeah, that's all we need there, I think. That'll smear onto the other face. Where's that spring? The spring's gone onto the wrong side. No, wrong slot. I can pull that back over and carefully reattach it. I probably should really put the circlet back on first, but I think that's pretty well held in place. Though when I try to fit the circlet, it might have different ideas if it's sprung. Get in there. There we go, and in there it goes. A little bit fiddly. That's just the mechanism to hold the, or each position of the switch as we slide that bit across. It just locks it in place on these little teeth. Now I need to get the circlip back on, and the shaft and circlip. I guess I want a little bit of grease around where the circlip's going to go, where the shaft is going to go anyway. So we put our shaft from our knob back on. It actually goes around the larger face there, so want a little bit of grease around that. Don't think I want much grease off this. There was a little bit though, so it must have had some. Perfect. Then that sprung washer thing. And get some pliers and try to squeeze that back on without shooting it across the room. I've really kind of got to hold this from the other side of pushing up on the lever so it doesn't drop out. Yeah, that's got it. Let's check that's home. Okay, that's not too bad at all. So we should now have the idler out of the way. Back and forward part again. Might even put a little bit more grease now that I've moved it around a bit. Just along the hole there. Just so it's got a light coating. Beautiful. Put that back in there. Now we've got our other part, the original problem part. Now what are we going to do? We're going to put the pin. Now we've got it so tight I can't undo the nut. Oh, I was only joking, but I think I'm right. I need something better than greasy hands to grip that. I might even have to put that in the vise or something and just see if I can grip it through the paper. There's some smooth pliers. I don't want to put anything serrated jaws on there, but yeah, that is not going to come undone easily. So this is the downside of tightening that up to get it to break the grease, because now I can't undo it, so I'm going to have to stick that in the vise, I think. Yeah, I got it. Had to do it up fairly tight just to stop the paper slipping. Now that washer I think was on top. Would make sense. And then you go through the hole. Yep. Now, I would say that washer probably wants a coating of grease as well. Although I can put it on the slot afterwards, so that's no big deal. I'll just do the top surface of that sliding part after I install it. So just a nut on the other side and a locking washer. I think I've got that right. I better make sure it still turns. Yeah, it's got plenty of room with that washer on the other side. I might do it up too tight, but that should be nice and solid. So I've got this pin back here. And yeah, this is going to be the fun part. Can I still jiggle? Actually, I probably should have put this on first, I think. Now, where did that other bit go as well is the next problem. That probably hooks around that. Yeah, I think I managed to jiggle it out last time, but no, it was attached to the post, that's right. So that wasn't such a good idea. Looks like those two bits have to go on together, just to make it a bit more fiddly. Oh, come on. That's all where I can find it, that's good. Again, I don't think I'll worry about putting grease on it just yet. It can all be done later. And I've got to get it so that, yeah, the little pin slots through the slot on this bracket bit here, the little pin coming out the side of this die cast bit. Now it doesn't want to slide back up. Oh, there we go, I can push the pin down. I'm not sure if there was something else attached to that, I'm trying to remember now. Not sure why it has a hole in the other end there. Oh, that was the idler, I think. Is that the idler? Yeah, I've got the idler loose, so it must, yeah, that's where it goes. As long as I know what's where. Don't like having random bits. I don't know what they do. Okay, it's nice and tight. Always should be sort of thinking ahead as you're doing the job. Does everything look like it's in the right place? Yeah, so now this slides up and down nicely, and that's where the idler sits. I think it actually went underneath there, didn't it? So hopefully that fits in the highest spot. Yeah, and that'll pull across. Yep, perfect. Okay, so I've just put some grease on the idler shaft where it goes up in this hole in the die cast bit, just so that lubricates that, and a little bit of push down on the bottom plate there. And our idler's sitting on the highest speed. We're on 16 there. I won't turn it down because that'll just come out. And I've got all my screws in. Best to keep them in like a little Ziploc bag somewhere, because I've got that little circlip in here, which we definitely don't want to lose that. I mean, a modern circlip will probably do the same job, but that depends if it's the same diameter, and it's always nice to put the originals back in this older equipment. And now I've lost my pliers, there they are. I normally just use some of these flat pliers to get them back in there, just being careful that it doesn't spring off somewhere across the room like they like to do at times. So yeah, so that's the bottom speed setting. That's sitting in against the side, which is a bit of a worry. Is that the right 78? Doesn't seem right. Yeah, the idler's actually rubbing on the case. Even that one. Oh, it's on the inside. Of course, it's on the inside of the platter is where the tyre contacts it, so that doesn't matter. where it sits at the moment is because there is no platter to push against, so that can spring wherever it needs to go. The platter will keep it in place as long as it's jumping each of these stepped speeds. And yeah, we'll have our platter in place pushing it back, and it's got plenty of room to go where it likes. Even if the platter was bent or something, it can swing back and forwards as it needs to. So I need another cotton bud. I'll use a bit of metho this time just to clean this off. A little bit of black stuff coming off, but that's usual because it's just old rubber. Although I probably should lubricate. I was going to take this other one off and lubricate the shaft up the middle of the idler. A little plastic washer or something, or it doesn't look too bad. There's a couple of little washers there. I'm not quite sure what they do. It doesn't look like it's had any grease on it, but I might give that shaft a clean off. Usually the best thing to do, just in case there is any old grease or anything on there. Doesn't seem to be too bad. I'll get that up inside the idler pulley, up its little bushing there. Just clean out whatever's in there, which isn't much by the look of it, and I might just once the metho dries off, might just put a little bit of grease on there, just a tiny bit. Just smear it around, just so it's got a little bit there to lube it. There probably could be a self-lubricating bushing there, these sort of bronze or whatever they are. It's got quite a bit of spin in it, which is better than it was before, so it doesn't have to put a little bit on there. I doubt it's going to create, they've got quite high torque, these motors. Doubt it's really going to care much about a bit of friction in the idler, but anyway. Now we'll just clean everything again, because I've had my greasy hands all over it. And double clean the pulley, just make sure, because I did touch it a bit, I think. Yeah, that should all be a goer. I don't know if I can put my hands on the very bottom, but I probably shouldn't anyway. Yeah, that's all looking good. A little bit of muck there. Probably should just clean out any dust. I'll just use a bit of paper towel to wipe that out of there. Brush it out with a paintbrush or something. Finger do a bit of a clean. Just being careful not to smear grease or anything anywhere. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I've got a little bit of grease on there, so I'll chuck that away. Get rid of our degreaser. Probably get rid of our grease and that cotton bud. Get rid of this band-aid too, it's starting to fall to bits. Okay, so we should, I'll leave the platter on the speed where it's innermost. Let me think, I think that's everything. There's no leftover parts. So the other thing I have to do is clean the actual platter shaft itself. I haven't done that yet. So I'll need a little bit more degreaser on a rag or a paper towel and just get all that grease off there, because I don't want to be sticking old grease back down where I just cleaned out the shaft, or the hole where the shaft goes, and risk it going sticky again, although this stuff seems pretty good. There wasn't any trouble turning the platter around, but just to get rid of everything. Don't think there's any grease on that plastic bit or Bakelite bit, whatever it is. Probably an early plastic. I think that's clean enough. I could give it a clean with some metho, but I think that'll do. That's the only other thing I've got, is I've got to reattach this, so that's got a bit of air in there. I'm guessing it's stopping it wanting to go down here. There it goes, you just got to keep pushing on it a bit. That's our idler. Now that's, is that engaged all the time? I think it was. I think it's, yeah, as long as they have power on these, the record player will spin. Looks a little bit like it might not be sitting right, but no, I think it's pretty good. Maybe a little bit of, yeah, there is a little bit of rise and fall in the platter, which may have been how it was to begin with, I would assume. Probably not the most precision things on earth. So I've got to put our little locking nut back into the shaft here. Just runs in that groove, or stops that groove from lifting. Now, where did I put that one? Oh, there it is. A little hex head brass bolt in there. You want to be super careful when the platter's loose too, that it doesn't drop out and break the stylus or something, so you try and keep your fingers holding it in place. I don't think this one, because of the suction, will come out in a hurry, but with more modern turntables they'll often just fall off, and you can risk breaking something if they do. Oh, we've just done something. Turn the switch off, I think. Oh yeah, because of course I just put the platter back on with that little plastic centre bit, and it did obviously operate it as said. As I said before, it's lifts that little lever up, and me winding it around has caused that to happen. So if we go back that way, as that, oh yeah, that's open the switch, and we come inwards, it should have turned it off again. Yeah. Oops. Careful not to bang the needle on things. So it's basically, this is the bottom of our arm. Let's try and get it in shot. And this lever across, that's the switch. Like I say, it's a bit of an odd setup. We've lost a little terminal thing there, but let's just come off there. It's got two wires, one into each coil, and then there's two wires coming off each coil into the switch, so I assume that completes the circuit from one coil to the other. So what happens is, so that seems when the switch is pressed in by this lever here, it'll be open circuit. So if I get the arm and go outwards, you can see this has come out, switch is closed, it actually locks in that position, or should, there we go. There's a little lever comes up here and locks that, so that switch now stays on. But as we get back across, if I can do this safely, and we're turning the turntable, I'm not sure which direction I'm going now, but it should eventually, if I'm going the right direction, which I'm probably not, I'm going the wrong way, of course. Being upside down, it helps to go the opposite way. We should get that to click back into place. Have I got, oh, I haven't got the arm in far enough probably. And it's making a liar of me, maybe I'm going the wrong way now. It doesn't, oh, are we going? No. Okay, it doesn't sound like working upside down. Let's move this across. Yeah, so maybe, I thought it's gravity related, but that, oh yeah, that lever probably upside down, it's going to fall and not get caught under that thing. Okay, so it is gravity related. So what just happened is the little, where is it? Wherever that was, hiding under here, a little bit that locked this place in the rotate position, the play position, that just lifted up, and this whole lot sprung back on this spring and pressed the switch back into the off position. So it's quite a simple little mechanical design there. But this should basically be a good working turntable now. Now the other thing I want to have a look at is the radio section. That's the reason I got it out. Being valve and with old capacitors and stuff, it really wants to look at as well. I'm not even sure if the amp works or anything. So I think it had sound on the radio, so the amp section must be working. Bit of muck on there. But it didn't sound like it was actually tuning the stations, but one thing I was thinking is, what do they use as an antenna on these? I'm not sure if it had a rod antenna in it or not. Like a modern radio, I'll just have a little rod antenna in it. So if that's grease I got on there, or just other muck that was already on there, but I'll clean all that off, whatever it is. So yeah, I'm not sure. I did find when I took the radio out there was an extra couple of screws underneath, and then there was a third screw holding the chassis in, which I couldn't read. It used to have a paper label on it, but I assume it said something like radio ground or something, but I'm not sure if it actually had an inbuilt antenna or not. So I'll have to have a look at that. But anyway, that's the turntable. Yeah, I'm making that worse rather than better. Yeah, that'll clean the worst of it off for now. I'll give it a proper clean when I'm finished with it. So I might just get this out of the way. I'll have a look at the chassis. Okay, this is the radio section. So you can see the front there, we've got our tuning, great big tuning dial that actually lights up. Got a switch between gram and radio. I think that was the volume, and click on and off. That's probably tone or something. The label is peeling off a little bit. Got some sort of band-aid like stuff around it there. There's our date, 14th of Jan 1960. So a lot of these old, at least Australian made chassis, actually put dates on their transformers. Doesn't seem to be anything on the transformer, the power transformer. Got our model and serial number. And yeah, one of the pins on this socket, which is where the turntable power plugged in, is coming a little loose. Looks like I've bumped that valve a little bit, or it's moved and it's been wrong to start with. And then we've got the phono socket there for that tuner input. But yeah, there's our tuning capacitor. Some sort of IF coils in these cans, I would assume. But no sign of an actual AM radio antenna. So maybe that is what... Well, this bracket that held the chassis in, with a screw that had a label originally on it. And it doesn't look like it's an earth to me, so that may well be an external antenna connection. Might be explain why we're just getting a lot of noise out of that radio. Now the other thing I noticed is under the power transformer there's all this wax. Seems to have, I assume, leaked out of the transformer and formed a sort of stalactites and stuff. Probably shouldn't take much more of that off, so I don't know if that's a sign that the transformer's getting too hot, or it might just be normal for them to do that. Got a lot of these old capacitors, you've got to be a bit careful. Some of these are probably very high voltage. Being a valve chassis, there's probably 300 volts or something coming out of that transformer, so I won't be putting my fingers across any of those caps, but I will be testing them afterwards. That is a 300 and 350 volt. Same with that one. A lot of these old Duke-on paper caps, and a few micas. These flat brown things are mica capacitors. A few old resistors. There's really not that much in it. It's a pretty simple circuit. Phono input goes across into a resistor there. Up into our mode selection switch, which probably is going to need the contacts cleaning in it. So it's a radiogram switch, and I guess one of the wires back out of there would go into, that's possibly our amplifier output stage. I assume there'd be at least one or two IF stages or detector IFs or something there. Got an old roller speaker here, which that would be the output transformer. It looks like it says 7000/3.5 or something, so that might be a 3.5 ohm speaker, I don't know. Yeah, it says 3.5 ohms. 83/3.5 ohms, whatever that means. Might be the size or something. So it's probably a 7k input to this transformer. I've got little bits, only just little bits of cotton or something there. Almost look like the leads off a little rod antenna. That bit goes down into the IF, so they go back down. Red and blue wire, they come out here, so I've maybe got a push-pull. One goes to each valve there. Although they're different valves, 6V4 and 6BM8. I know very little about valves. They light up and run hot and do the equivalent job of transistors basically. So I might just even plug this in and take this tape back off the lead. Plug this in and get an idea what it's doing. Again, being super careful with these because they are high voltage. Yeah, got a nice, try not to touch anything, nice light up dial there, lights up under the central bit there. On gram. Let's put it on the radio, it'll probably take a little while to do anything. There it comes. Good with that tone control, if that's what it is scratchy as. Oh, that's the it's on power tone by the sound of it. And that's the volume. Yeah, first time I think I've seen something with a tone control with a power switch on it. Usually it's just volume and power at the same time. Since usually that's what you would be adjusting. The most is turn the power on and then set the volume you want, but this one's a rather odd design. But at least these old pots, usually with a squirt or contact cleaner, will come good, unlike the new ones which once they're stuffed they're pretty well stuffed. A little bit of reception there. Ooh, yeah.
You'd obviously love to have made it much sooner than this, but the fact is that success under your...
So that's the difference when I just put my finger on that little
Okay,
bottom.
yeah, just sure I'm ready. I've done my time in...
So that's good to hear that the radio does seem to work, just even with just me as an antenna. So that would suggest the audio stage is in good work and order and all that. The electronics generally, like I say, probably hasn't had a lot of use. I probably should check those electrodes, but a lot of these things, if you leave them alone, they just tend to keep going. Just because they're so well built back in the day. And I guess if I turn to gram, put the volume up a bit, I assume there wouldn't be any voltage on there. A little bit of hum there, so yeah, it's a good sign that the phono section will work. Definitely give that pot a clean. What do we got? Two pots under the board here. The old school Australian. I forget what brand these things were. I must have seen hundreds of them in the day, but I can see the Valley Oils up in the mega ohms. That's an is it IRC? With a little ohm symbol, I think that's the ones. Now, I've got to find my contact cleaner, there it is. Give both of them a spray. Oh, so these old pots normally come good because they're just so well built. Heaps of carbon track in there. Just a bit of dirt and dust in them usually. Whereas the newer ones, I think you actually wear through the carbon track because they're so flimsy. And I probably should do the contacts in that switch. Just give it a little bit of... It's pretty tarnished in there. A little bit of switch cleaner on the contacts. And then flick it back and forwards a few times. It's a bit tarnished around, but it looks like the bit that actually goes between the contacts is okay. Guess ideally that would get her clean, but you can see where the contacts have been sitting on it, they're still good there, but a little blackened elsewhere. But that should clean it up a bit. What are we on? Go to radio. Yeah, clean as.
And again, he had to battle hard at times. He went into the first break after the first hit.
So with me on the antenna, it actually has quite a decent volume. Which is not bad for a few little valves in there. There's only 4 of them. So it's kind of less complicated than even a transistor radio would be, which would have more transistors than that, I would think. Especially with that sort of volume. But I guess transistor radio doesn't have 300 odd volts in there. Or mains power and all the rest. Probably should give this a quick dust, I guess. Another thing to look for, I just found a pin that had gone down the side of the record player when I blew the dust out of it, and also one of these hair clips was floating around inside the case. So you don't want this thing to go back, especially a portable one they tip on the side and stuff. I think that's a hair clip, I don't think it's part of the unit. It looks like similar to a hair clip, and it's not quite the same as a modern one, but anyway, there's something there, which I don't think is part of this unit, so there's always place to look for foreign metal objects that have fallen into these things. Now the other interesting thing is, looks like we've actually got the name of the people that covered the cabinet. Yes, there's something printed there I can't really read, and then it says covered by Hill Brothers, Kingsway, Kingsgrove. I think Kingsgrove is near Sydney somewhere. Just did have their address, the address of the company. Might be able to get that on the camera with a bit of luck. But Newtown, New South Wales, Kriesler, Australasia. Let's try and get this radio back in. Okay, I've got it on phono mode. Let's try this on this old record and see if it actually goes. That's 33, or we're on 33 already. Oh, that's lucky. Not sure why that turns around there, but anyway. We pull back, it starts and stops. Okay, got to hold it a little bit back. These wires aren't going to be much good hanging there because they're going to scratch the record. Ooh. Oh, the needle's good, surprisingly. Making quite a bit of mechanical noise there. Something might be scraping on something. And we've got a couple of wires hanging out from under the head shell which is scraping on the record. So if we go to the centre, and there's our auto stop. So at least that's working. So that's fine. It is a little eccentric, that metal bit, but there's no noise there, so it's the idler or the motor making that noise. Good thing I didn't fully screw it back together. It looks like we've got to pull that back and hold for a bit. That's a bit funny with the startup. No, now it doesn't want to start. Okay. So it looks like we've still got a couple of problems with this thing. Okay, I've got the lid on the platter off. And power back on, and it seems to be the motor making the noise. I take the idler off, it's still making the noise, it's the only thing rotating. So the motor's bearings are a bit noisy, or bushings. Doesn't explain why. That's the bit that's got to drop down there. This doesn't seem to be clicking into place. Yeah, there's not quite, the arm's not moving that quite far enough. You can, but geez, you've got to pull back. Maybe you just got to really pull back. Yeah, it seems a little harsh, but maybe it's just me not being used to it. I doubt that's adjustable, but let's have a look. Yeah, that's just this lever coming across here. Yeah, what's pushing on that? That's the pin, as there is a pin on the die-cast bit on the bottom of the tone arm. It is. No, it's not butting against the... Feels like you're butting against something though. It's probably because that's already down. Careful. Yeah, it seems a little bit slow. You could probably file a bit off it, or if that can move. So the bit that comes across is what? That's the actual bit that is on the switch. So it's pushing on this bit, and this bit is the bit that slides across to drop the other bit. Oops, just see it there. So it's almost like there's... Although I did say this was a bit tight before, I think. That seems loose. That's loose. So I wonder if this bit is actually a bit stiff. That seems okay. I might actually lubricate that bit just to make sure. And the course the arms drop down. But we'll have a look at that tomorrow. Okay, back onto this turntable again. Still got the problem. The motor's a bit noisy, and also this arm, getting this arm to come across and actually swinging it outwards from the record to get it to actually open this power switch up. If I reset that, it seems a little on the tight side. It will drop through, but I wasn't feeling 100% right. I think there's still meant to be some grease on that piece there, and probably something underneath this particular lever near the switch. Feels fairly tight, so I think I'll give that a lube. It won't hurt to do it anyway, and see if that frees it up a bit. It's also possible there's a little bit of play or wear or something in here, probably a bit of wear things. It's not just pushing quite far enough across, so we may have to adjust the lever on the other side or something. But anyway, we'll get this bit off, and since I've lubricated everything else besides the motor, we might as well have a look at this. And what's going to fall off on the other side? No doubt something is. That comes up through this whole piece here, the bit that lifts off that little cam thing in the middle of the platter. So I'll just hold on to that so I don't lose anything while I get the nut and washers off the other side. Okay, not sure if that's going to come loose, but I guess this bit should actually come out now. Not that it necessarily has to, but oh, actually no, there's something else holding it in. As long as it's not going to fall out. Hey, it's got this circlip on the other side still holding that. Possibly wouldn't hurt to lubricate that as well, I would say. I have to take this spring off here, and then I think that will just, no, it just slides out there. That was definitely pretty tight. You can see where it's been rubbing on there. And I'm not sure, I don't know if that's just me taking it off. Well, it's got some scrape marks on there for some reason. Oh, the spring's come off on its own there. Yeah, that's slightly corroded as well by the look of it. So I'll give that a good clean off. And all this other area where it's sat. Is that another, it's an actual washer there. So there's a washer on that piece, which should hold it up, but we've kind of got this thing pressing down on it. That probably wants a clean as well. I don't think I can take that off, so it's going to be a matter of cleaning up under this thing the best I can and trying to maybe get a bit of paper towel or something under there and just wipe it back and forwards the best I can. Seems to be a little bit of dried up grease on there, a bit of green coming off. I think that's just this. Yeah, taking a little bit of this paint off. That can be a problem with metho sometimes, it'll take paint off. So maybe that's what's on this, maybe it's just a bit of paint, I don't know, but just in case there's any dried up grease, I'll give that a good clean and round that where the washer and nut went. Put that to one side. I don't think that's meant to be lubricated. It's got like not a plastic washer, some sort of fibre washer in there. It all pivots pretty freely. I don't think that's got anything to do with it. It's just a matter of getting the thing to move across so that this can drop down. Yeah, I think that all looks pretty good. Don't think it needs any lubrication under there. Just where this bit sits onto the actual base here. I don't think it really needs it. There's definitely some sort of like scraping there, or is it old grease, or I don't know. Could just be scraping. It seems to be this green stuff is some sort of paint on here, but not very well held on. So I'm going to put that washer back on there. That may even need a little bit of grease on it. Let's see, that just holds, actually sits in that hole. And that's moved to the wrong side now. That has to come back up there before we can even put this back incorrectly underneath it. So I think if I lube under that bit, maybe a little bit of grease around where this sits on the eye there, and probably a bit underneath. Because yeah, so the washer goes through, so it does scrape against the chassis. It doesn't actually. I thought that might have been lifting it up, but it isn't. So it's not surprising there's a bit of friction there. Not sure what the hell will scrape that, but anyway, I might just put a bit of grease on the bottom of this bit. Get an old cotton bud and just we'll go around where it rotates there. Or pivots, I guess. And yeah, you can see there's a definite shiny patch there where that's been scraping. And also at the end there. So maybe even this whole thing I'll give it a light bit of grease on it. This end bit doesn't matter because it's bent upwards. And yeah, we want the other side where that other bit sits on. Don't like to put too much grease on these things, just collects the dust. Well, that should be right underneath the chassis, but I find it's best not to put too much on. That other piece underneath is sticking through and blocking that from going in. There we go. I think that's a bit freer than it was. It's more these pieces here I think I put most of the pressure on it. At least I can be sure that's not causing any problems. Same with this is the washer underneath. It looks like it does have some dried up grease or something on it. Certainly some scraping. So I think we'll give that a good bit of grease on it, since that holds everything sort of together. And I'll have to push that lever up from underneath and put the little locking washer in. But it certainly won't hurt to do this just while I'm servicing the whole thing. Not sure. That should rotate regardless of how tight that nut is, since it's sitting on that other washer. Put the spring back onto it. Probably won't operate correctly without that. It just goes down in the hole and hooks back on the chassis there. Disconnect that. Oop, something's not moving. What have I done here? That still moves alright. Oop. Yeah, now we're free. The question is, does it just simply get that thing to drop? It doesn't feel as hard as before. Still has to go right to the limit. There's a little bit of play there. I think it's a little bit better than before. Doesn't seem to feel like I'm really pushing as hard. So now it feels like it's in the normal range, whereas before you felt like you had to push the arm further than it wanted to go. So that's probably just had some friction right at the end there. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, you don't feel like you're about to force the arm off now. Before it felt like I was, almost pushing it to breaking point, but yeah, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, it certainly feels a lot less pressure than before. I've also got to do something with these little cables here, which can probably just be, I'm not sure how you get the cartridge out of this thing. Must be that thing on, the screw on top. If I could just wrap those ones around, I might be able to do it without lifting anything up, but I think they just want wrapping around the other two cables so they don't hang down, which I assume was something like how they were placed originally. They've, for whatever reason, dropped down since then. But if I can get them wrapped around, they should shorten up and stay in place, hopefully, rather than dropping down and scraping on the record like they have been. I think that's alright. Yeah, that's... don't think they're going to come out as hanging a little bit there again. But that doesn't have the length anymore to actually be a hassle. Almost wants a little bit of tape or a cable tie or something around it. Don't really want to put a cable tie on this thing because it's a bit modern for this old unit, but if I can just get them to stay there, just so they're up and under the... before they were hanging right down, now I've put a couple more twists in, they can just sit against the arm there, and I think that'll be alright. That'll keep them out of the way. Does seem a little loose. I don't know if that screw needs tightening up. It may well do. Oh yeah, it certainly does. Although, do these things have a... it's got some sort of flexible thing above it, I think. And it's bent to one side, not surprisingly. I don't really want to mess with the needle if I can help it, because they're very fragile things. The 78 side doesn't look too good, but it's a bit corroded, I think. Anyway, I think that'll probably do to get that out of the way. Now, the other problem I had was this motor doesn't do it by hand when you hand rotate it. But the motor was making a bit of a noise. So I don't know if I should remove the whole thing probably, and hopefully we just have to undo, yeah, these screws are just on hexagonal standoffs, brass standoffs. And the third one, oh, there is it? Yeah, it is that one. That's handy. The screw that holds one side of the motor together has to be undone anyway. Cool, of course it's the tightest one. That does not want to come. I'll have to use the old trick of a pair of side cutters squeezed into the side of the screw. Oh, even that doesn't seem to want to shift, that one. Sometimes it just gets a bit of torque into it to... oh god! Break the tightness, but that does not want to come loose, which is really annoying because I can't get the motor apart without undoing. I guess if I take the other side off, maybe I can break the... by grabbing the hex brass part. Yes, that's got C-clips on the other side going through the rubber, all sitting on top of the rubber mounts of the motor. Let's just get that little C-clip out, and the washer. And let's hope this motor can actually be disassembled. It may not need to be, but it's just probably catching a bit. Make sure our arm isn't flapping around. Yeah, perfectly quiet when you rotate it by hand. Oh, there's another washer. Better remember to put that in before I put it back. But yeah, this screw does not want to come undone, so I guess I can grab it from the high side here. Yeah, that rotates alright. Yeah, it's come loose now, no problem. So I don't know why that I could not get that to turn at all. I'll put that one in the end of the standoff just so I know. And I might put that washer back on so I don't forget that. It's got to go under the... on the underside of the chassis. So I think we'll see if we can... undo that. I guess I should really use get a set of proper nut drivers, but it's not very often I do anything with hexagonal nuts on it these days. But a pair of pliers or a small shifter will do the job usually. So that's our other motor screw. Try and keep that separate from the others just so I know. And here comes our motor apart. Yeah, it's just the standard sort of bronze bushings. Yeah, that definitely seems like the grease on there. That doesn't slide up and down nicely like it should. I'd say again the old greases, if it had some grease, but it may, often these things are self-lubricating, or they're meant to be in the more modern stuff. Whether they really are is another question, but yeah, there's definitely had some grease on there, I'd say. Oh yeah, look at it. Just the stuff coming off on the cotton bud shows you there's been grease in there, I think. That's not just the bronze itself, so that definitely needs re-lubing. Slide that down and do the other bit. And slide it back and forth a few times. You should, with an ample metho on there, getting up inside there, it should smear it all down the shaft where you can get to it. Because I don't really fancy taking the pulley off. I could, but this should suffice. Yeah, that's already feeling freer than it was. Get some red paint or something off that pulley. Someone's put a red marker in it for some reason. Not even where the grub screw is, so I don't know what that's for. Yeah, I think that's pretty right. And just force that down into there and try and... That'll come off now, won't it? Of course. Just remember which side, that's the top side of the motor. Otherwise you end up with the motor going backwards or something if you put it back together the wrong way around. Well, that's pretty obvious because the cable's going from the back or the underside. Sometimes you've got to manipulate these cotton buds a bit. Just so it actually goes down in there properly. Because I really want that to bottom out if possible. Bushing thing moves side to side like it kind of, you can pivot sideways. I think that's pretty clean down in there. So I really need to, I guess, set that back on the motor itself, ready to, in position. Maybe put a little bit of grease on it already. And then I'll put a bit on the shaft. Again, not too much. And while I can get to it, I'll put a bit on this shaft. Maybe a bit above as well, just so it gets in there. Yeah, at least that slides up and down nicely now. Shouldn't really matter about this as long as you don't get it on the main pulley part, but I'll give that a clean again anyway. If you've had your fingers all over everything and been messing around with grease and stuff, always best to clean everything that touches rubber surfaces when you finish each time. Don't know if it spins any better than before, but hopefully that'll take the noise out of it. May not do anything, but now the next problem is the wires on that side. So the plain bolt went on this side. It's always a good idea to try and remember the order you did everything in. But of course by the time you've pulled everything apart and put it back together and reorientated it a few times, it can be a bit difficult to remember exactly what you did. So just keep a mental note of like what goes where. You can just logically work it out if you need to. Like the motor wires came down the bottom here, so that bolt just goes through with nothing underneath. The other one obviously has to have the brass standoff on it because there's one missing there now. But not do that up too tight. I have a bad habit of tightening things so much they break, so just got to be a little bit careful with these, especially with brass bits. want them nice and tight so the motor can't work itself apart, but you can actually break these things reasonably easy if you're not careful. That washer's there to remind me, so I'll just take it off again. But you can sort of feel how much torque's there, so that's pretty good. And that should go back in through that hole with the washer on it. I've still got a screw there, so it saves messing around. Can get that pretty tight. And unfortunately this little plastic bit that held the wires is broken. Don't think there's much I can do about that. Maybe a blob of Aerodite or super glue later when I've finished doing everything. Yeah, can't force that. Could even wrap a cable tie around or something, maybe, I don't know. Prefer not to put cable ties in it. I might get that to, it might even stay there just from the little pieces sticking out that are now, yeah, surprisingly good. To make them nice and tight. Oops, let's drop it down. And let's get that on there. Washer on, and I'll circlip sticking to me more than it's sticking to the unit. And get that in there. Okay, now since I've done that, I'll have to clean. Always clean the idler since the tools have touched it and stuff, just in case any oil's got on it. And same with all the pulleys, all the surfaces on this for the different speeds. And I can just hold it still with a bit underneath. It doesn't come into contact with the idler. And that should... I think I just put my hand a little bit on the top, on the bottom pulley, so I'm going to do that again. That's all turning, so fingers crossed. I'm going to release that. Yeah, that definitely feels better. Seems to cut in a bit better, so I can put this thing back together. And I've basically gone over everything now. All the underside's been done. All the top side's been done. So I'll try it. I'll reassemble the unit. I'll try it again, see what it sounds like. Okay, it's the moment of truth. If I pull this back, you should hear that thing drop. If I bring it into the, yeah, bring it into the centre, it turns off. Yep, click and off. This mat's a little bit eccentric, but so the arm now feels pretty good, and the turntable doesn't seem to be making that noise it was making. Though one thing I better do is screw this down a bit. Well, I meant to do that anyway, to the transit screws so that the springs can bounce. And the turntable's actually isolated from any knocks on this thing, so we're pretty right. And obviously you want that down below the record. So pull back, click, and I haven't even turned. Oh yes, I have turned it on. What am I on? Gram. That seems to be working. Well, supposedly intimate pianos, but not sure if that intimate. That's probably a bit better. Certainly seems appropriate for an old record player like this. Hopefully no copyright on this stuff, but it's often the crappy old stuff that seems to have the copyright on it more than the new stuff. only other test I could do is for speed. Somewhere I did have a speed disc for these turntables, but whether I still got it. No, I'm not sure when my strobe disc is actually gone. Used to make a little cardboard cutout thing, just sitting there, and it had some little black lines on it for each setting, which under a fluorescent light or neon or anything would show if the speed was correct. Seems to be producing okay sound. Besides the old record's a bit scratchy. But it did just come out of the freebie bin at the tip shop, so can't expect too much from it. Ooh, we've turned off maybe a tad early there. It may be a bit less sensitive if you don't sort of bring it right in. Really shouldn't cut off until it gets into this centre groove. Maybe if I'm gentle, I don't really want to listen to the whole song. Yeah, looks like we got to the centre. Oh, not quite. It's only a few grooves away. And there we have it, it turned off alright, so that's a good sign. Yeah, it does. If I move it manually, it probably catches it a bit earlier. Probably also lifting it up might catch it earlier. If I've got a 45 somewhere. There's an old beaten up Rolling Stones record there, which definitely will have copyright on it. Got to get used to this flick it backwards to turn it on thing. Sounds about right. Not play much of that because that'll get copyright struck. So I've got to take it in the middle to stop it. So I think this thing's basically in going order. Yeah, nice smell of hot valves coming out of these vents. Plenty of heat. I can hear a transformer humming a little bit too. Put it hum in the background. Come back to radio. Now, where was that screw? I haven't put the screw back in, I don't think.
On the special. What will we find today? Today we're going to drop surrounding house. Stock has written 5 novels now. The last couple of which have been live in preservation. We've shed some light on some really interesting parts of Australia's history. And earlier this year,
yeah, now I've lubricated everything in that turntable. Seems to be all working fine. These probably do make a little bit of noise. Doesn't seem to at the moment. Depends where the idler is sitting, I guess, but when you spin them, they probably make a little bit of noise. One thing I haven't done is I've just set this platter back in temporarily. I haven't put the screws back in, so I've got to tighten the screw that stops the platter coming out, especially since this is a portable unit. So if people tip it on its side or something, there's a chance that it'll just fall out, even though the suction of the grease will probably keep it there. So I'll disconnect the power. I'll just have to tighten that up, and then this thing can hopefully be screwed back together once and for all. Looks like I've taken that right out, so got to put the little brass bolt back in there. And yeah, that clamper I put for the wires, that little thing that holds the wires, now I've put it back, seems to be staying in place alright, so that's good. Everything looks back to normal. Probably doesn't need to be that tight, but might as well tighten it up a bit because don't want it vibrating its way loose again. And just jiggle this back into place. Transit screws are a good thing to grab hold of because you want to just lower it in reasonably gently. And that's it. I can put the screws back in and that hinged cover back on where I took it off. And I think we can call this thing fixed. I'll give it back to the lady and she can give it a run and let me know if there's any problems with it. But I think that should be going again. She just might have to... I don't think I've got any glue left. Just wants that front label sticking on, and it's almost as good as new. A bit of a clean. And yeah, she have one in amazingly good condition. It's only mono, but at least you can have a listen to a few records. It's, you know, a bit of an old family heirloom of these, so it'll be a nice piece to own. Thanks for watching.